They laughed at her second-hand shoes, pushed her tray in the cafeteria, and thought they could break her. But 5 minutes after their last cruel prank, they were the ones screaming for help. The new girl doesn't cry, she watches. She waits. And when the moment comes, she doesn't just strike back. She teaches a lesson no one will ever forget. Who was Kiera really? And what did she bring with her to Millfield High? The air around Millfield High had always felt stale. The same drama, the same hierarchy, the same untouchable mean girls ruling the halls like royalty. But everything changed the morning Kiera arrived. She wasn't like the other new students who tried too hard to fit in or wore smiles too wide. She stepped off the school bus in silence, her face expressionless, her eyes hidden behind long dark bangs. Her clothes looked like they belonged in a thrift store bin, mismatched and a little too big for her thin frame. She walked with a slow, steady pace like she was counting every step. By the time she entered the school building, dozens of eyes had already judged her and moved on. But 3 pairs didn't look away. Haley, Morgan, and Lexi, Millfield's self-declared queens of cruelty, leaned against their lockers and shared a look that said one thing: fresh meat. Haley was the ringleader. Blonde, confident, and venomous with her words, she lived to humiliate anyone who didn't fit her idea of perfection. Morgan was the sidekick, a follower with a mean streak and no identity of her own. And Lexi, she was the wild card. Smiling 1 second, cutting you down the next. Kiera was a gift to them, a blank canvas for their entertainment. They didn't waste any time. By lunch, rumors about Kiera's creepy vibe were already spreading. Someone said she smelled like the forest. Another claimed she never blinked. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. Perception ruled Millfield, and Haley knew how to twist it. In the cafeteria, Kiera sat alone at a corner table, carefully picking apart her sandwich like she was afraid of it. Haley sauntered over, flanked by her loyal shadows, and accidentally spilled an entire bottle of water on Kiera's tray. The room laughed, but Kiera didn't react. She simply stared at the puddle spreading across the table. Then she slowly turned her eyes to Haley and said in a soft, even tone, "You shouldn't have done that." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't angry. It was worse, calm and matter-of-fact, like a warning delivered too late. Haley blinked, thrown off for a split second, but quickly recovered with a scoff. "Or what? You'll curse me," she mocked. But her voice trembled at the end. Something about the way Kiera had looked at her, like she already knew what would happen next, left a cold spot in her chest. For the first time, Haley didn't feel in control. Later that day, as the final bell rang, a strange silence seemed to follow Kiera down the hallway. She didn't speak in class. Didn't answer when the teacher called her name. And yet, when the lights flickered for a brief second in 7th period, every student turned toward Kiera's seat, as if they knew. By the time school let out, the whispers had begun. Someone claimed they saw Kiera talking to herself in the mirror in the girls' bathroom. Another said she didn't have a reflection. It was nonsense, but the energy had shifted. The kind of shift that lingers in your bones. The kind that tells you something's about to happen, and you can't stop it. That night, Haley posted a video mocking Kiera, adding fake horror music and calling her the walking curse. It got 1,000 likes in an hour. But just as Haley smiled at her screen, her bedroom light popped. She jumped. Then her phone froze. It glitched, then restarted, with one single notification: "You shouldn't have done that." But she hadn't sent it to herself. And no one else had access to her phone. Kiera sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the dusty journal in her hands. Its cover was cracked, the corners curled from years of being gripped too tightly. She never opened it unless she had to. Tonight, she had to. She turned the page to the entry marked with a small smear of dried blood and read it again. Not for clarity, she remembered every word, but to feel the weight of it once more. The past wasn't behind her. It clung to her like wet clothes. At Millfield, people whispered because she was different. But at her last school, they whispered because they were afraid. Because something had happened, something no one could explain without their voice shaking. It started with a dare. Back at Preston High, Kiera had been quiet there too, though less guarded, more hopeful. She had tried to make friends, cracked a few smiles, even joined the art club. But it only took one moment for everything to change. A group of popular kids, not so different from the ones at Millfield, decided Kiera was too weird to be left alone. They said she talked to shadows, painted creepy things, and read books that looked satanic. They called her the witch, and when she ignored them, they pushed harder. One Friday night, during a school lock-in event, they pulled a prank that went too far. They lured her to the basement under the gym, locked her in with the lights out, and left her there. What they didn't know was that the basement had been condemned for years: unstable floors, mold, and rumors about a janitor who had died there decades ago. Kiera remembered the cold first. Then the creaking. Then the silence that pressed on her ears until it felt like something was whispering inside her head. She had screamed. No one answered. Hours passed. And then, something answered back. She never said what she saw that night. But when they finally opened the door the next morning, she wasn't the same. Her eyes were different, colder, distant. Her skin was ice. And standing behind her, in the dark, was a shadow with no source. They all saw it. But no one ever spoke of it again. The school called it a hallucination. Said she'd had a breakdown. The pranksters swore they didn't mean any harm. But within a week, 2 of them dropped out without explanation. 1 transferred. The last one, the one who'd locked the door, was found in the nurse's office, shivering and repeating the same sentence over and over: "She's not alone down there." That incident was buried. The school hushed it up, didn't want bad press. Kiera was quietly pulled from classes, sent to a counselor, and then disappeared. Her family moved. New house, new school, new mask. But the thing was, it didn't stay at Preston High. It followed her. Or maybe it had always been with her, and the basement just made her finally see it. Her journal held more than memories. It had warnings. Sketches of the shape in the dark. Notes about what it liked, what it hated, and when it came closer. It didn't want revenge. It wanted balance. Justice, it whispered. And Kiera had learned how to listen. At Millfield, she had hoped it would stay quiet. That maybe, for once, she could blend in, finish the year, and move on without someone trying to break her spirit. But bullies were everywhere, and the pattern had started again. She knew the signs. The shift in the air. The way her reflection lingered a little too long after she walked away. The hum of electricity in the walls. It was back. And it was hungry. The notebook's last page was a fresh entry. Just 3 lines written in her small, neat script. It doesn't like cruelty. It feeds on fear. And once it's awake, it finishes what was started. That night, as Kiera stared into the mirror, her own face flickered for a second. Her eyes turned black. Her lips moved without her speaking. And in a voice too low to be hers, the mirror whispered back, "They have no idea what they've touched." The following week, the air inside Millfield High turned heavy, like something was pressing down on the walls. It wasn't just the weather or the flickering lights in the gym. It was something else. Something no one could name, but everyone felt. Kiera walked the halls without rushing, without blinking, always staring straight ahead. The laughter behind her didn't faze her. The notes shoved in her locker calling her names didn't make her flinch. It only made her quieter. And the quieter she got, the more nervous people became. Her presence had started to feel like a warning. But Hayley didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. The attention made her feel powerful, and she needed the spotlight. That's why she planned the gym prank. She thought if Kiera was humiliated in front of the entire PE class, she'd finally cry or maybe even transfer again. But what happened during that prank changed everything. They waited until the coach stepped out to answer a call. Hayley gave Morgan and Lexi the signal. Kiera had just finished her laps when Morgan tripped her from behind, sending her face first onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the gym like a whip crack. Everyone turned to look. Hayley strolled over, grinning, holding up her phone like she was filming for fun. "Oops," she said, crouching beside Kiera. "Did the little witch forget how to walk?" Lexi added with a fake gasp, "Careful, she might curse you, Hayley." Kiera slowly pushed herself up. Her hands were scraped, blood smudged across one palm. But her eyes were calm. Too calm. She looked straight at Hayley, and the room went cold. She whispered just loud enough for Haley to hear, "He knows now." Haley blinked, confused. "What?" But Kiera was already walking away. Later that day, Haley found her locker wide open. Her books were soaked. Her mirror was shattered. And etched into the back wall was a single sentence, "You shouldn't have done that." She looked around, ready to scream, but the hallway was empty. That night, her phone glitched again. It restarted over and over, playing only one sound, her own laugh from the gym prank. Over and over. She dropped the phone. It cracked. And on the screen, as it flickered, a shadowy shape could be seen behind her, even though she was home alone. The next day, Morgan arrived late to school. She looked pale, exhausted, like she hadn't slept. She told Lexi she'd heard scratching at her window all night. When she opened the curtains, there was nothing there. But etched into the glass from the outside was that same sentence again. "You shouldn't have done that." Lexi brushed it off as some creepy coincidence, but her confidence cracked when her locker refused to open the next morning. It banged from the inside, like something was trapped. When a janitor finally forced it open, everything was shredded: textbooks, gym clothes, even her makeup bag. Sitting on the top shelf was a single black feather. And it was still warm. That weekend, the three girls didn't hang out. They stayed home, each too rattled to admit what they were really feeling. But on Monday, the school was buzzing. Someone had uploaded a video anonymously to the student forum. It was grainy, shot in the girls' bathroom. In it, Kiera stood in front of the mirror, but her reflection didn't match her movements. When she blinked, the reflection smiled. When she turned to leave, the reflection stayed still, staring forward. Students whispered about witchcraft, demons, even ghosts. Teachers tried to block the video, but it was already being shared. No one could explain how it was filmed or who had posted it. And Kiera, as always, said nothing. Just sat in class, silent, drawing in her notebook. That afternoon, during sixth period, the fire alarm went off. Students rushed into the hallway. But it wasn't smoke that filled the air, it was ice. The temperature dropped so fast it caused the metal lockers to frost over. Someone screamed. Then, all at once, it stopped. No fire, no explanation. The principal blamed a faulty system. But a maintenance worker later told a teacher he found a locker with a burned photograph inside. It showed the three girls standing over Kiera during the prank. And none of them remembered anyone taking that picture. The final straw came when Haley woke up with scratch marks down her back. 3 long, red lines, like claws. She rushed to check her bedroom windows. Locked. Doors. Locked. She was alone, yet something had been there. On her mirror, written in fog even though there was no steam, were 5 words: 5 minutes. Then they beg. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number had texted her a photo of her standing in the hallway at school, from behind, taken seconds ago. But she was home. She dropped her phone. It buzzed again. "He knows now," the message read. And the screen turned black. The transformation inside Millfield High wasn't instant, but once it started, it spread fast like a sickness no one wanted to name. First came the silences. Long, strange pauses in classrooms when Kiera walked in. Whispers that stopped mid-sentence. Eyes darting to her desk, then quickly away. Students who once giggled behind her back now lowered their voices, afraid she might hear. And for the ones who had laughed the loudest, Haley, Morgan, and Lexi, things turned darker. Their perfect world began to crumble, piece by piece, in ways they couldn't understand or stop. The school itself seemed to change. The lights flickered more often, usually when Kiera passed under them. The hallway clocks began running backward, just for a few seconds at a time. Most students chalked it up to old wiring or imagination. But the ones closest to the heart of the storm, the bullies, knew better. Haley stopped wearing makeup. Not because she didn't want to, but because every time she looked in the mirror, her reflection glitched. It would smile too long, blink too slow, or, worse, mouth words she wasn't saying. One morning, she saw her reflection twist its head fully backwards, then grin. She screamed and shattered the mirror with a curling iron. Her mom thought it was a nervous breakdown and took her to the doctor. The doctor suggested therapy. Hailey didn't argue. She just kept her eyes off any reflective surface and covered her bedroom mirror with a blanket. That same night, her phone buzzed at 3:03 a.m. A message. No number. Just an image, the exact photo she had used in the walking curse meme about Kiera. Only now, Kiera's eyes were glowing, and the background was completely black. Morgan's breakdown came differently. She started hearing voices. They weren't loud, just whispers behind her in empty rooms or echoes in the school bathroom. She told herself it was stress. But then her locker wouldn't open. She tried 3 times, then finally forced it. Inside, every book was turned upside down. Her notes were torn to pieces, and right in the middle was a black notebook she'd never seen before. It was open to a page that read, "We remember what you did." She threw it across the hall, heart pounding, then spun around. No one was there. But on the ceiling above her, faint and jagged, was something written in chalk: "You can't outrun what you invited in." Lexi tried to act tough. She joked about ghosts in the hallway, laughed about the rumors, and even posted a TikTok pretending to summon spirits. But she couldn't explain why every time she entered her bedroom, her closet door was open, just slightly. She'd shut it, lock it even. But it always creaked open again. One night, she finally checked. She turned on all her lights, flung open the door, and found a pile of dirt in the corner. On the wall, scratched into the paint with what looked like a fingernail, were 3 initials. KRC Kiera Rose Caldwell. She screamed, called her parents, begged to sleep in their room. But when they came up to check, the dirt was gone. The scratches. Painted over. As if nothing had ever been there. By now, the teachers had begun noticing something was wrong. The girls' grades dropped. They skipped class, avoided each other. When asked what was going on, they stuttered, lied, or said nothing. But the damage was visible. Bags under eyes. Trembling hands. Startled looks over shoulders. At a staff meeting, the guidance counselor raised concerns. But when she attempted to speak privately with Kiera, something happened. The lights in her office blew out. Her computer crashed. And when it rebooted, the screensaver wasn't the usual school logo. It was a photo of her own face, eyes crossed out in black. She took medical leave 2 days later. The janitors complained of cold spots in the halls, especially near the girls' bathroom and the basement entrance. One even refused to clean after hours, saying the mop water turned black without explanation. He was laughed at, until a second janitor reported seeing handprints on the inside of a storage closet door, hands too small to be his and far too many of them. They painted over it. It came back. No one wanted to clean that section anymore. And still, Kiera said nothing. She went to class. She did her work. But now, her drawings in her notebook were more disturbing. One teacher saw them and nearly dropped the book. Pages full of the 3 girls, drawn in chilling detail, being chased, haunted, and trapped. In each drawing, there was a figure behind them. Shadowy, faceless, with long arms and no feet. Just a black blur stretching out from the corners. When the teacher confronted Kiera, she simply looked up and said, "They'll understand soon." That afternoon, the teacher's car alarm went off for 3 hours straight, even after the battery was removed. When it finally stopped, a single message had been carved into the hood: "You saw it too." At this point, Millfield High was holding its breath. Everyone sensed that something was building, something big. The atmosphere was thick with fear, especially around Kiera. Students avoided her. Some even left anonymous notes in her locker begging her to forgive the girls. But she never responded. Not once. She didn't need to. Because whatever was working through her had already made its decision. It had seen enough. And it was waiting for one final spark to unleash what it truly came for. The sun had already dipped below the trees when Hailey, Morgan, and Lexi stood outside the back door of the science building. The sky was darkening, but none of them noticed the time. Their nerves had been building all day, jittery glances and restless feet, and now their fear had boiled into something hot and desperate. They weren't here to scare Kiera anymore. They were here to stop her. Or beg her. Or maybe just understand what the hell was happening. Morgan clutched a flashlight, her knuckles white. Lexi had her arms folded tight across her chest, eyes darting around. Haley stood in front, trying to look brave, but the tremble in her jaw betrayed her. She reached for the door handle and pulled. It creaked open with a metallic groan. The hallway beyond was silent. Too silent. The school had long emptied.
No janitors.
No teachers. Just the echo of their own footsteps on the tile. They moved as a pack, their shadows long in the flickering hallway lights. When they reached the science lab, they found the door already ajar. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by the fading light from the windows and the flicker of a single desk lamp in the far corner. Kiera stood near the whiteboard, facing away from them. Her hands were resting calmly on the edge of the teacher's desk. She didn't turn. She didn't speak. Haley stepped in first, her voice shaking but defiant. "Kiera," she said. "We need to talk." The moment the words left her mouth, the door behind them slammed shut. The lights blinked once, twice, then went out completely. Total darkness. Then a faint hum filled the room, like static or electricity pulsing through wires. The flashlight in Morgan's hand flickered, then died. Lexi gasped. Haley reached for her phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Panic was setting in fast. They fumbled toward the windows, but the blinds had snapped shut on their own. A cold wind rushed through the room, even though there were no open vents. Kiera still hadn't moved. Then, slowly, she turned around. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hollow, black from edge to edge. "I warned you," she said, her voice layered, as if two people were speaking at once. The girls screamed. Lexi tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. Morgan backed into a desk and fell. Haley stood frozen, staring at Kiera, her mouth open in disbelief. "What do you want from us?" she shouted. Kiera blinked slowly. "I don't want anything," she replied. "But he does." Then the temperature dropped again. Frost crawled along the lab tables. The glass beakers cracked. The overhead projector burst with a sharp pop. And from the shadows behind Kiera, a figure began to form. Not a person, not fully. More like smoke given shape. Long arms. No face. The same figure from Kiera's drawings. It stepped forward, and the girls collapsed into each other, sobbing. Morgan covered her face, whispering prayers. Lexi dropped to her knees, screaming that she was sorry. Haley staggered backward until she hit the wall. "Please," she cried. "We didn't mean it. We were just messing around." Kiera tilted her head. "Messing around," she repeated softly. Then she raised her hand, and the shadow behind her mirrored the motion. The light sparked to life for a single second, and in that flash, the girls saw themselves, not as they were now, but as they had looked during each cruel prank. Laughing, pointing, throwing food, shouting names. And in each memory, behind them, was the shadow. Watching, waiting, feeding. They began to sob harder. "We're sorry," Morgan choked out. "We'll stop. We'll do anything." The shadow moved closer. Lexi shrieked. Haley grabbed Kiera's arm. "Please. Please stop this." Kiera looked down at her hand. "This isn't me," she whispered. "It's him. He protects me. He shows them what they are." Haley fell to the floor, curled in a ball. "Then tell him we get it," she pleaded. "Tell him we're not like that anymore." Kiera's eyes flickered. For a moment, something human returned to her face. She looked up at the shadow. It paused. The room held its breath. Then Kiera stepped between it and the girls. "Enough," she said. The word echoed unnaturally, shaking the walls. The shadow hissed, then slowly receded, folding in on itself until it vanished completely. The lights flickered back on. The room was still again. The air returned to normal temperature. The frost melted. Haley was curled on the floor, tears streaming down her face. Morgan held on to Lexi like a lifeline. And Kiera. She just stood there, quiet, her face unreadable. Without a word, she walked past them and opened the door. It swung freely now. She stepped into the hallway and disappeared. The girls didn't speak. Couldn't. They sat there for minutes, shaking, until finally Morgan whispered, "What just happened?" Haley looked at her with wide eyes. We almost died. Lexi shook her head. No. We saw ourselves. They never told anyone what happened in the lab. Not the teachers. Not their parents. Not each other. But they changed. Stopped picking on people. Stopped hanging out together. They couldn't even look each other in the eyes without remembering. And as for Kiera, she didn't come to school the next day. Or the day after. Her desk stayed empty for a week. Then her name vanished from the attendance list entirely. The video didn't stay private for long. 2 days after Ivy received the anonymous link, it leaked. No one ever admitted who released it, but the footage landed on a popular video sharing site with the title "Waitress Asks Denzel for $50. You won't believe what he does next." It exploded. Within hours, views crossed the 100,000 mark. By morning, it hit over 1 million. People couldn't get enough. Comment sections filled with arguments, tears, praise, and cynicism. Some called Ivy brave, a fighter who refused to let pride stop her from speaking her truth. Others accused her of chasing clout, saying she planned the whole thing for attention. But most were just moved. Moved by her voice, her honesty, and the way Denzel never made her feel small. The way he listened. The way he answered not with judgment, but with a challenge. News outlets picked up the story. Talk shows debated it. Think pieces were written. Is this the future of storytelling? What happens when real people become inspiration without even knowing it? Ivy's face became a symbol. Her story became a viral lesson in standing up for yourself, even in the most unexpected way. But none of the noise outside could match the storm inside her. For the first time in her life, people were talking about her without asking her what she thought. The girl who had once walked through life invisible was now being seen by millions, and she wasn't sure if it was a gift or a trap. She quit the diner. Not in a flashy, movie-ending kind of way. She just didn't go back. She texted the manager a thank you and told him it was time for something else. He understood. Go chase it, he wrote back. Whatever it is. She didn't have a clear plan, but offers were already coming in. Interviews. Representation. A scholarship from a foundation that cited her as a catalyst for authentic public storytelling. But she stayed quiet. She turned most of them down. Ivy wasn't interested in being famous. She didn't want to be turned into a brand or a trend. She wanted something real, something lasting. So when she finally agreed to appear on a local morning show, it wasn't for money or clout. It was because they agreed to let her speak uninterrupted. No cue cards.
No filters.
Sitting under the studio lights, Ivy looked calm, but her hands were clenched in her lap. The host smiled and leaned in. You went viral for something a lot of people wouldn't have had the courage to do, she said. What made you ask Denzel Washington for $50 that night? Ivy took a breath. I wasn't trying to be brave, she said softly. I was tired. I was broke. And for the first time in my life, I said exactly what I needed without sugarcoating it. I didn't know who he was at first. And when I found out, I thought I'd ruined everything. But I guess I didn't. The host laughed gently. You did the opposite. Ivy nodded slowly. Maybe. But what people saw in that video, it was just one moment. What matters is what came after. What came after was a new apartment. Not big, not fancy, but safe, clean, and close to Jess's school. She used part of the money for a better wheelchair, the one she'd been dreaming of for him since last year. She used some of it to pay down the medical bills that had haunted their mailbox for months. And then she used the rest to take evening acting classes at a local center. Not because she thought she'd be a star, but because it made her feel alive. Because she found herself again on that stage, under soft lights, telling stories that sounded a little like hers and a little like everyone else's. Denzel never showed up again. Not in person. But he didn't need to. His fingerprints were on everything. On the way she walked taller now. On the way Jessie smiled more, knowing his sister wasn't drowning anymore. On the little sticky note she kept on her wall that read, "Money doesn't fix broken people. It shows them who they really are." That sentence lived in her now, a quiet echo that reminded her what this had all been about. One morning, She received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo, her, mid-audition, eyes fierce, voice midline. On the back, one sentence was scrawled in sharp black ink, "You chose forward."
No signature. No stamp.
Just the truth. Ivy framed it and placed it on her dresser, next to a picture of her and Jessie at the beach when they were kids. Every day, she looked at both. One reminded her of where she came from. The other reminded her of what she chose. The world may have seen a feel-good story. A waitress and a celebrity. A viral moment. But what Ivy knew, and what she never said in any interview, was that the real story wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about a quiet war she'd been fighting inside herself for years. About the moment she stopped asking for permission to matter. And about a man who, with one envelope and one stare, handed her a mirror instead of a handout. In the end, she didn't need to be discovered. She just needed to be reminded that she was already someone worth finding.